Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge. I'm Anthony Irwin, today joined by a good friend of mine. We've been doing this for roughly the same amount of time. We have taken very similar paths, actually, now.
Yeah.
You have the Rose Garden Report. I have my thing on Substack. You are absolutely killing it. That is Sean Highkin. Again, like I said, Rose Garden Report is where you can find him covering the Blazers. How you doing? You upright?
I'm good, man.
You want to lie down?
I'm all right, man. I'm just this is I kind of knew that this month was going to be a lot. I just you know, we do the
Nothing
same thing.
going on with the team you're covering.
We do the same thing every few weeks with this stuff, man. I am over it. I'll say that. I would like with the Dame stuff. I would like to know one way or the other. If he wants out, do it. Trade him. Move forward. Let me figure out how I'm going to cover the team.
Let me live.
Let me fully lean into the Scoot stuff if that's the direction that they're going to go. But then I also feel like if he doesn't do it this summer, I kind of never want to hear about it again. I don't want to. If he decides not to go, get traded, whatever. I don't want to do this again in a year. I don't want to do this again in 2 years. Like, do it or don't. That's kind of where I've come down on it.
The situation kind of reminds me of Kobe's trade demand.
Yeah.
In the year that he was
07.
Yeah, 07
I wrote that a couple weeks ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because remember the whole thing was he wanted to be traded, but he wanted to be traded to a contender, and I mean, his situation was
Chicago.
A little bit different because he had a no-trade clause in his contract, which Dame doesn't have. And he was going to get traded to the Bulls, but Luol Deng was going to have to be in the trade. And Kobe realized that if Luol Deng was coming back in the trade, then they wouldn't be any better than the Lakers team that he wanted to leave. So he ended up not going through with the trade. And then, obviously, it ended up working out okay for him to stay with the Lakers. That's the part of this that I keep coming back to with the whole situation where it's very easy in a vacuum to look at it, especially now that they were able to draft Scoot Henderson with the number 3 overall pick. And if they were to pivot and rebuild, you could do a whole lot worse than Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe as a starting point. But there's this idea, and you hear this kind of parroted on a lot of the national talk shows and a lot of different places. Oh, they need to just trade Dame for a haul of draft picks, young players, and rebuild. The problem with it is that there's no trade out there. The two teams that you hear about him being linked to are the two teams that he supposedly would want to go to are Brooklyn and Miami, and neither of those teams really has anything. Like, you're going to trade Dame for Tyler Hero and 2 far-out first-round picks. Like, that's not, that would be a fireable offense if Joe Cronin took that deal.
Mm-hmm.
And Brooklyn, I don't think I guess they have a little bit more as far as draft picks, but, there's no trade that.
But they're Phoenix draft picks, and those are the draft picks. While they have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker.
No, there's no trade out there that's viable, and they're not gonna. If they were to trade him, they're not gonna Blake Griffin him and just send him to L.A. or not to L.A. They send him to Detroit and send him somewhere he has no interest in going.
Yeah,
it's just the problem. It's the problem with it is that you can say, they should trade him for a bunch of picks and young players and rebuild, but that trade is not out there. There's no trade that checks the boxes of being somewhere he would want to go, having enough stuff to trade where Portland isn't trading their all-time franchise leading scorer who's still in his, as good as he's ever been for pennies on the dollar, and then that team still has enough left over to still be a contender once Dame gets there. And that's always been the thing I've been coming back to, where I'm just this is why I don't think anything different is going to happen with it this time, because there's as much as you can look back objectively and say, it makes sense for both sides to move on, there's no real viable way of doing that.
Yeah, and that's why we find ourselves in this cycle. And, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because I've started to notice fatigue even from people who I follow in the Portland area, right? Steve, Ian, you, Eric, and, a lot of the people that I've noticed start to I just want a resolution. Let's just one way or the other, let's just get there. And that was really how I felt about 07 with Kobe, which is I understand why he's frustrated. he just, he averaged 35 points a night and, was a first round elimination. He was dragging Luke Walton and Smush Parker and
right.
that cast of misfit toys that, yeah, you knew that was not going anywhere. And I understood why he was frustrated and was sick of the Lakers waiting for Andrew Bynum to turn, to turn into something that was legit. Now he did, that year Bynum really did take a step forward.
They got 2 titles out of that run. I mean, I know part of it was like they went and traded for Pau Gasol and that kind of swung it, but
Well, I remember distinctly they played a game against Seattle. I think Bynum had like 20 and 10. They beat Seattle back when they had KD, and it was like I think they did. I forget. But like they beat that, still good ish Seattle team. And man, I'm gonna have to edit that. But I remember like they asked Kobe after the game, what do you think about like the steps forward that Bynum has taken? Has that got you to like rethink your stance on wanting to be traded? The Lakers, I think, were above 500 at that point. And he was like, yeah, no, why would I want to leave this? This is really fun. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, this is great. And then like a week later, Bynum steps on Lamar Odom's foot, dislocates his kneecap, and then they go out and trade for Pau. Super weird year that year. But the reason I bring that up is because like Kobe, and I think a lot of stars see the game this way, Kobe couldn't see a world in which Bynum took that step forward the way that he did that year. And I think a lot of these guys, and, for fairly good reason, rookies typically are not, particularly winning players. Totally. But, like, Scoot's really effing good. Like, Scoot, if you were to design a guard mate next to Dame, he's a lot closer, I think, to what, you need next to Dame than he's had in CJ McCollum and that he has now in Anthony Simons. Then he's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit longer, more athletic. I could see a world in which, as the third guard, he steps in and Portland surprises some people, and I think that's kind of the unified front that Portland needs to take here. It's like, no, we've sold them on this idea of it. We've seen rookies step in. Christian Brown just recently. If you make their role nice and narrow, they can be winning players here. And this is the image that we've sold to Dame. But regardless, one way or the other, they do need to provide a unified front. And I just wanted to ask you though about like the notion of like, have you sensed the same fatigue that I'm noticing? Have you sensed the same fatigue from fans and like, come on, we can't ride this roller coaster again?
I think people have been over it for a while. Not over Dame, but I think there's a real, like, this cycle happens every year where, and I think Dame does bring some of this on himself. I do get annoyed when, like, I'll get a couple of different times over the course of the past season, there were national writers in town to write profiles of Dame for various, like, major national outlets. And I kind of asked them, I'm just in the media room chatting with them before a game or a practice or whatever, and ask them, hey, so, like, what are you doing with this Dame profile? Like, what's your angle? And every single time they'll say, well, it's about how he's, like, loyal to Portland and he's not going and chasing a super team or chasing rings. And I have to, like, restrain myself from visibly rolling my eyes every single time I hear that that's the angle that somebody's taking, because I know
we're singing that song again, huh?
Because I know that the way that that's gonna go whenever that story comes out is he has the same quote about it that he has in every single one of these interviews that he does. That quote gets picked up by, like, Bleacher Report and Clutch Points and NBA Central and all the aggregators or whatever with, like, the eyes emojis. Yeah. And then the way people react to it on Twitter is, we get it, Dame, you're loyal to Portland, stop talking about it all the time. I think part of it is that most people who cover the NBA don't have any creativity, and that's the only thing they know how to ask Dame about. But I also think, and I've been thinking this more and more lately, I used to kind of feel bad for Dame that he just has to keep getting these things, these requests for these interviews. Yeah. I kind of think at this point he would do himself and all of us a lot of favors by starting to say no to more of these requests than he has. I kind of think he shouldn't have done that that Showtime boxing one that blew up a couple of weeks ago. I kind of think he should start being like, look, like, I mean, and that thing is, like, I know Dame quite well. I know I've known him for a long time. I've been covering the NBA since his rookie season. I know him very well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's doing anything calculated by doing these interviews. I think he's a really nice guy and likes to be accommodating to the media. And he's also honest to a fault and doesn't really know how to be a politician and avoid questions. He'll answer a question honestly if you ask him a question, no matter what the context is, which makes him great to cover for me as a beat writer.
Yeah.
But it also leads to that whoever that guy was that was doing the Showtime interview the other week, asking him, hey, would you want to go to Miami, Brooklyn, Boston? Like, obviously trying to entrap him into something.
Yeah.
And Dame just not thinking beyond, oh,
He
yeah,
just,
Mikal
walks
Bridges.
Right into the...
Mikal Bridges is my buddy. I want to play with him. Or, Bam Adebayo is my buddy. I would want to play with him. And then, of course, that gets turned into, oh, he's giving his wish list of trade demands on this boxing show on Showtime. And it just, I feel like we do this every year. And I mean, I think at a certain point, like, I don't know, if Dame does end up staying here this summer, next time I see him, I might actually say something to him and just be like, dude, could you maybe say no to some of these interview requests going forward so I don't
Not mine, but
oh, no, for sure. But, like, I don't know, man. Like, I think everybody is kind of over it. I think, people like me who cover the team are over it. I'm sick of, being asked about it on radio hits and stuff. Obviously, I'm happy to talk about it with you because you messaged me a couple days ago asking me if I wanted to do this, and obviously I always come on with you because you're my guy and we've known each other for 10 years. But I did tell you, I was like, just as a heads up, I'm kind of over it with talking about the Dame stuff.
Yeah.
And you said no, I actually kind of want to get into how the dynamics of covering it. And I was like, okay, I'm happy to do that, but like I've turned down so many podcast requests, interview requests, just because I'm sick of, like, I have no new information about Dame.
There is none.
What's going to happen? What's out there right now? He and his agent Aaron Goodwin met with Joe Cronin, the Blazers general manager, yesterday. Joe put out the statement to me and others that they had a great dialogue and they remain committed to building a winner around Dame. I've tried to check on it privately from both sides. Nobody's really saying anything right now, one way or the other. I kind of think both sides, beyond that statement that went out, which I think it's notable that Chris Haynes also tweeted that statement. And that if Dame's people felt differently or that they weren't on board with it, Chris Haynes would have not done that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. The silence would have been deafening.
So for right now, like, things are status quo. I think that, you saw Brian Windhorst had this morning on one of the whatever show he was on, that Dame is going to give them free agency to try to do something and get some veterans. And I mean, I'm kind of with you. I mean, my opinion doesn't really matter here because I'm not the one making these decisions. It's really up to Dame at the end of the day what he does or doesn't want to do. But I kind of don't disagree with you that if they get the right veterans with some of these trade possibilities or the mid-level exception or whatever it is that they do in free agency, there is a world, and especially if Shaedon Sharpe takes the kind of leap they think he's going to make, there is a world where you can do it that way. Yeah. But my understanding is that right now Dame is and here's the other part of it. Like, Dame is a smart guy. From a lot of standpoints, but also from like a basketball standpoint and from an NBA standpoint. Dame watches a ton of League Pass, but he also knows the salary cap very well. He knows the realities of the trade market and stuff very well. And I don't think he felt betrayed or anything when they didn't trade the number 3 pick on draft night for somebody established because, and this is something that, a big reason why they didn't trade the pick. And this is like, I know that Dame, obviously Dame was just on his vacation and stuff, but like, and so they didn't talk like for like a week or so, but Dame and Joe Cronin talk all the time. Like, Dame knows all of this stuff. And basically with the new CBA and how restrictive it is at the top, if you're spending a lot of money, the value of having somebody as talented as whichever of Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller they were going to end up drafting with the 3rd pick on a rookie scale deal makes it so much easier to do other stuff. And so I think as much as maybe Dame would have preferred that they... Especially
in the CBA.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, as much as, like, I think Dame wanted them to trade the pick, and I think there's a very small number of guys that they would have traded the pick for if those guys were available. Like, they... Mikal Bridges is the one that they went after. That's the guy Dame wants more than anybody. I think that's somebody they would have considered, but Brooklyn, from what I understand, was just completely not open to engaging on it at all. Like, they were just like, we're not trading him. Like, that was a non-starter for them. The Zion thing is interesting. Me personally, if it were me making a decision, I would have taken the swing on Zion, even though, you have all the concerns about the health and the work ethic stuff. I think from an upside standpoint, if that was on the table, that would have been like a thing to really seriously consider. From what I understand, a big enough
name that he maybe looks at that and goes like, all right.
No, I think Dame would have been on board with that. My understanding is that New Orleans never actually put Zion on the table. I think they were trying to get Scoot with, like, the 14th pick and future picks and Trey Murphy. No, they weren't.
Not even Ingram?
I don't think the Blazers would have been interested in Ingram.
Yeah.
I don't think they view him as I mean, it's a very small list of guys that they, like, Brandon Ingram is not making you a title contender, whereas a healthy Zion would make you a title contender if that would work out. I don't think, like...
Unfortunately, that's an oxymoron.
Right, I know. But, like, Ingram I would put more in the category of, like, a Zach LaVine or a Karl Anthony Towns, or, like, it's somebody you could trade for that's a name and has been an all-star a couple of times, but that's not really changing your world to the point that, you should give up the number 3 overall pick for him.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I wrote this yesterday. I don't think anybody's faulting the Blazers front office for going the way they did on draft night, where you have this asset that's honestly too valuable to trade for anything that's actually out there.
Yeah.
And if Scoot Henderson is really as good as people say he's going to be, and since that draft pick was made, I have done a lot of, reading and watching and stuff of, like, all kinds of Scoot stuff. I am pretty convinced that Scoot is, like, that dude, and that Scoot might be...
He's legit.
Like, he might be John Morant without the off-court stuff. Like, that be...
Did you watch the... Because he and Wemby played, right? They played against each other.
Yeah.
And but, he was, like, right there for that challenge. And I was just like, oh,
yeah,
this
like,
guy...
mentality-wise, and also, like, there was a video of Mike Schmitz, who's now in the Blazers front office, but was a draft analyst for ESPN for a long time. About a year ago, when he was still at ESPN, he did he does those things with prospects where he, like, sits down with them and breaks down film. He did one of those with Scoot that was, like, 20 minutes of them breaking down his different, tendencies, and just listening to Scoot talk about this stuff. Like, I'm just like, okay, this dude works. This dude watches film. This dude, like, has the right attitude and is like, can point out things that he's bad at and needs to get better at, and says, this is exactly how I'm working. Like, mentally, like...
And is also maybe less interested in IG Live.
Yeah, there's that part of it too. And then, like, our mutual friend Miran Fader did a story on him on The Ringer a few months ago. And every single thing I've read about Scoot makes me think, okay, this dude is it. Like, this guy is, like, if you cannot pass on this dude to trade him for, like, Pascal Siakam or something, if you have to max him out in a year. Like, I totally get why the Blazers did that. But I also understand, and I wrote this yesterday, if Dame feels like, I'm Brett Favre and the Packers just drafted Aaron Rodgers. That's kind of
especially at his position.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, and that's a little bit of a different dynamic than what you were talking about with the Kobe Bynum thing. It's not like Kobe and Andrew Bynum play this. Like, it's not like the Lakers drafted this, scoring two guard who, is very ball dominant and, is going to encroach on Kobe. You draft, you have Kobe, and then you drafted a center back when the center position was more valuable, at the time than it is now. Yeah. Like, you can say, okay, this guy is raw and he's going to take some time to get there, but at least positionally it makes some sense. The little bit more of a complicated thing with Dame and Scoot is that they play the same position. And I think the argument for it is that Scoot, and this is kind of what Joe and Chauncey have been trying to, push, at least publicly, over the last week since this draft happened, that Scoot, because he's been a pro for 2 years and has been playing in the G League and has been playing against grown men, is not going to take the kind of time that most 19-year-olds take to get
the Luka theory
to get to. Yeah, that's kind of what they're banking on with Scoot, or honestly, even John Morant his rookie year. I know John played in college, and it was a little bit of a different. It wasn't like the same level of competition, but John Morant was one of the few rookies, especially rookie guards that, like, I can only think of, like, John Morant or Dame his rookie year, or like Derrick Rose his rookie year. There's only a couple of point guards that were that good their rookie year. I think they think that Scoot is going to be impactful right away. And I think it's just a matter of other people whose opinions matter here need to be convinced of that also. But, I mean, depending on what else they do, like, there are still, like, I think Anthony Simons is... Yeah, like, I think... But it's but there's always been a path. It's just a matter of, are they going to be able to, take that path? Like, they're, the Anthony Simons thing is, like, I think that's, if they're going to make any kind of real upgrade, I think if you're not trading, the third pick or Scoot Henderson now that they've drafted him, that's the piece that you have to move. And he's, a young, high-scoring guard who I think still has some upside. He's on a pretty good contract. That is somebody you might be able to get something for. The Nurkic thing, like, you have to upgrade that spot, but also you're going to probably have to attach something to that contract to get off of it. So I don't know what you're going to be able to do there, but it's like, there's a world that exists where, you trade Simons for, like, a starting caliber wing. I don't know who that is. I don't think Toronto really wants to part with OG, but that's sort of the archetype of the type of guy you want to go after. Maybe you, like, sign Harrison Barnes for the mid-level exception or something, and that's enough. Maybe, like, and then you try to upgrade. There's a path where you can do that, and then you have Scoot and Shaedon as, like, the two young guys in the rotation, and the rest of the roster is all veterans, and you bring Jeremy Grant back. And that's a way where, if you're any of these teams, like, you look at the West, outside of Denver's the one team that, you can say they just won the title. All those guys are in their primes. There's no reason that
it's hard to get to that level.
There's no reason that anybody thinks they're going to fall off next year. I expect Denver to be just as good as they were this year. Like, there's no reason to think otherwise.
Especially if they retain Brown.
Totally. But even if they don't, like, they're still going to... Like, Denver, I think, is still going into this season. Denver is still going to be the team to beat in the West. I think that's pretty uncontroversial to say that.
Yep.
But go down the whole rest of the West. Like, Phoenix just did this Bradley Beal deal. They're pretty top-heavy, and, Durant has had trouble staying healthy the last couple of years.
So is Beal, and so is Booker.
Yes. Golden State, like, those guys, like, I would imagine they're probably going to bring Draymond back. Those are, but those guys are all older. They're kind of at the end of their run, and it's the same thing where, like, there's paying so much money, especially, like, I'm not sure how this Chris Paul thing is going to work, but, like, they're paying so much money to their top 2 or 3 guys that they're not going to be able to fill out. They're going to have to fill out the rest of the roster with, like, vet min guys, like, so you don't know if, and those guys, and, like, Draymond and Clay are, both older, so you don't know for sure that that's going to work. The Clippers are never healthy. The Lakers, the additions they made at the trade deadline. Yeah, they're in that group, but, like, LeBron is older and out. AD is still, never healthy. Like, you don't know for sure that they're going to be better. Memphis seemed like they were up and coming, but now John Morant is going to be suspended for the first 25 games.
And they're going to lose Dylan Brooks.
Yeah, they're going to lose Dylan Brooks, and Brandon Clark is probably going to be out for the whole year with the Achilles.
Yeah.
Like, so they have some question marks. Dallas is a disaster right now. They have Luka, but, like, that roster's a complete mess. You just go down the line. Like, outside of Denver, there's no team that you look at and say that team is definitely going to be a contender. And so if you're Dame and you're Portland, if they add, if they can upgrade a couple of these other spots and a couple of, get some veterans in there and, have a little bit more of a balanced roster that makes sense than what they had last year, it would be very easy for Dame and for, like, Chauncey Billups and Joe Cronin to talk themselves into, why can't we be this year's Kings and be a 3 seed?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, that in 2007, that year starts with Kobe demanding to play on Pluto. Kobe actually got booed in the first home game that year. He got booed by, now he played so incredibly well that he was getting MVP chance by the end of the game.
Right.
but like, he, that season starts that way, and the Lakers were super surprising. Lamar Odom was starting to kind of, like, fit into a role now that he was, like, the 3rd best player on that team, instead of the 2nd that started to make a little bit more sense for him. And, like I said, Bynum played really, really well to start the year. I think I'm going to do the whole Harrison thing. People forget about Bynum, but he was really effing good at the start of that year.
People forget Andrew Bynum was a bucket.
Was a bucket.
With the steam face emoji.
With the yeah. Exactly. But like, it took some early season success, and, we don't have the schedule out yet. So maybe even better, like, maybe Portland gets a soft early schedule and they win some games. And now all of a sudden Dame has talked himself into this. The only thing that I would like, and I think you're on the same page with me here, is, like, if that is the path, commit to the path.
Yes.
I don't want to hear this again. We're good here.
I could not be more with you. And here's the other thing that I think people, don't think about as much when they talk about like, oh, Dame needs to get out of here, Dame needs to go somewhere else, Dame needs to, go to Miami and have a chance to contend, whatever. How has that worked out for Russell Westbrook? How has that worked out for Chris Paul? Like, once you leave, I mean, you look at Chris Paul. I mean, Russell,
especially for point guards. It's good that you mentioned 2 point guards. Yeah,
and Dame, Dame made All NBA last year. Dame had the best, arguably statistically the best year of his career. He looks as good as he ever has, but he's gonna be able to, have unlimited rope in Portland to age however he ages because he's their guy. If he goes to let's say he does want to be traded and he ends up in Brooklyn or something. If they don't win in the first couple of years, it's very easy to see him becoming Russell Westbrook, where it's oh, we need to get off his money because he's old and he's injured. It's going to be
almost $60 million.
It's going to become like that, or like Chris Paul is one of the 5 greatest point guards ever to play, and he's gotten salary dumped the last he just got salary dumped
4
twice.
Out of the last 5 years.
Yeah, like Russell Westbrook, he go Oklahoma City, they decide that's run its course.
We don't know where he's going to sign.
He gets traded to Houston, and that doesn't really work with Harden. He gets traded to Washington, and he actually is pretty good that year, but that team wasn't any good, and they just were kind of they just kind of let him do his thing. He gets traded to the Lakers, and that's a complete disaster. And then they are can't wait to get rid of him. Once you leave your original team, that is a possibility that happens. And that's something that you run the risk of. And the other thing is also that the people on First Take and all these shows that are screaming about how you need to be rescued from Portland or from wherever, as soon as you do get out and go somewhere else, those people don't care about you anymore. They're going to start talking about now. They're going to immediately going to pivot to Stephen A. Smith being I'm so sad seeing Anthony Edwards in Minnesota. They're going to immediately just move on to the next guy. They talk about how I feel so bad for Dame. I want him to have a chance to contend, but as soon as he isn't in the news cycle anymore, they're just going to move on to the next guy. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think that's something, I mean, again, I know Dame quite well, and he's a really smart guy, and I know he's thought about this stuff. And I don't know, maybe he does decide he is willing to risk that, but I don't know. It's not there's no guarantee you go somewhere else and it's any better for you. And then he might be looking back in a couple of years and say, I had a pretty good thing going in Portland, even though, we didn't, we weren't, title favorites.
Well, that's actually the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and it's a perfect segue because the part of this that I don't sense gets talked enough about, especially by First Take voices, is the role that Dame plays in the difficulties of building around him. He's a $50 million point guard. He's 6'1". He's not the best defensive player. Incredible offensive player. Right. If not for Curry, would be considered, one of the greatest, should still be considered one of the greatest offensive point guards that we've ever had. But it is difficult, and especially it's difficult when, Portland moves off of the Dame CJ combination, and then it just so happens that Simon steps up and he's really good. But you can't have a Simons next to Dame, and you can't have a CJ next to Dame because there isn't the defensive presence in that backcourt there.
The Scoot thing is a little bit less redundant because he's a different type. At least offensively, I think because of the size, because he's 6'2", I think there's still going to be some defensive issues there if that's the way that they go. But
he's a long, thick 6'2".
Yeah. No, I've seen him up close at his press conference after they brought him in for a pre-draft workout. That dude is built.
Yeah,
he's 6'2", but he's a big dude.
Yeah. He's like Derrick Rose-ish in that regard, totally. And so I was, but I'm listening to all of this and I'm really happy that you mentioned the lack of patience that other teams have once you leave. If let's say Dame commits to this, sticks it out with Scoot and they give it a go, they go out, they get the veterans and stuff, and it doesn't work out, he is still absolutely beloved, probably even more beloved for buying into that timeline, right?
Yeah.
Let's say he goes to Miami. In Miami, it winds up that and by the way, mathematically
Jimmy's injured
speaking,
all the time.
Yeah, well, there's that, but like their run this year was pretty insane. It's not the kind of thing that I would consider particularly sustainable.
No.
Let's say he goes to Miami, and Jimmy breaks down, and there goes the defensive presence on the perimeter that you need around Dame. You do have Bam, and he's going to help a little bit there, but the patience and some of Dame's warts are that's gonna be more of the focus. It's like, if he gets traded away from Portland to a situation that he considers himself more likely to win in, and then doesn't win, then
he's also more likely to get blamed for stuff.
Exactly, because he's the thing that was added that was supposed to take them over the hump, and
then it's going to get into these other teams feeling like, oh, he's a small guard who's in his mid-30s making $60 million. We need to salary dump him, and then he might, again, have the Russell Westbrook trajectory where even though, like, in the right situations, he's still, I know you have your certain feelings about Russell Westbrook from the way that it went with the Lakers, but
my favorite player ever.
He was good with the Clippers. Like, there are roles in which he could still be a productive player, but that's what he is now. As soon as Dame gets out of Portland and it doesn't work out in the first place, that's going to be what he is. Honestly, this is a take that I've been kind of like marinating and workshopping.
All right.
The idea and the concept of Chris Paul on the Warriors is so stupid that it might actually end the player movement era. Because that's the one where you look at it and you're just like, who wanted this? Like, Warriors fans that I talk to are like not that excited about it. It's not a good on-court fit. He's not the same guy that he was. He's, physically not the same dude that he was. And you're talking again about a small point guard who's,
he's on a team he hates.
Making a like, this is one of those ones where I'm just like, this is the first one that I've really looked at and just been like, what are we doing here? Like, does anybody like this? Does anybody want this? Like, this is so stupid. And, like, honestly, I kind of think this is partly the NBA's fault for, like, post LeBron decision leaning so hard into, trade rumors drive attention and drive buzz, but, like, this stuff gets old after a while, and, like, there's like a diminishing returns on, like, just it being this constant cycle of, like, who's the next star that's going to want out? I know that there are, media outlets that I used to write for that's the only thing that they care about, and, like, as soon as that isn't there to talk about, then it's like, oh, gotta move on to the next thing, and it's just like that stuff is so, like, people care more about the transaction stuff than they care about the game.
The action.
And I don't, like, I get it, because that stuff is, like, exciting and it's fun to talk about to a degree, but, like, when it gets to a place where, like, Chris Paul gets salary dumped twice in a week and ends up on the Warriors, it's just like, does anybody want this?
Well, that's the you mentioned the player movement aspect of this, and I've long wondered, because, like, for one thing, it was mislabeled. It was called the player empowerment era, but it wasn't. Like, it was
the LeBron empowerment movement.
It was the star empowerment era. Like, you look at any of his teammates, I don't think Lonzo Ball felt particularly empowered when he spent the entirety of that season in Anthony Davis trade rumors. So there was that, but then, what players have found out and what stars have found out, LeBron, most among them, I would argue, because of the way that things went with him pushing for Russell Westbrook and then that blowing up the way that it did, is they've realized, oh shit, with power comes accountability.
Yeah.
And like, a lot of this time, it doesn't come in the accountability of, like, they aren't going to get fired by the team that employs them. That isn't going to happen, but you are going to get some accountability from fans. And Lakers fans are just like, yeah, we're sick of Le GM.
Yeah, because LeBron and AD were the ones that pushed for the Westbrook trade, and that you had to trade away KCP and Kuzma, who were two very valuable guys on the team that won the title, and then they immediately,
all KCP did is go out and win another championship.
Yeah, like, those are two guys. Those are two guys that they traded away and weren't really able to replace because LeBron and AD wanted Westbrook, and that was a disaster. Right. And I think this is also, like, kind of the spot that Dame finds himself in, because he doesn't really want to, like, I think he's self-aware enough to understand that he doesn't know as much about being a GM as the GM does, and he doesn't know as much about being a coach as the coach does, and so he's not really interested in saying, like, you have to go get this guy or I'm out. Like, he's never really operated that way. He's kind of starting to put a little bit more pressure on now, just because being the nice guy and, doing that way for his whole career hasn't really worked out.
Yeah.
But I think that really just the way that this stuff has kind of gone, or, the Nets letting basically Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving run the whole organization has basically just proven. I mean, it's not even just limited to players, like, shouldn't be, making personnel decisions. You think about for however many years there was that run where
the GM thing.
Right, like Tibbs in Minnesota, Stan Van Gundy in Detroit, Doc Rivers in the Clippers. It's two separate jobs that should be done by two separate people.
Yes.
So, like, I think, like, the idea that, like, these teams are so scared of losing LeBron that, like, they're just going to go and trade actual valuable role players for Russell Westbrook just because he and AD are pushing for it. And then how did that work out for them? I kind of, like, honestly, I kind of think that as much as, like, it's been pretty polarizing here since the draft in Portland, there were fans who are, like, mad that they didn't trade the third pick for a star, even though trading the third pick for Brandon Ingram or something, or Zach LaVine, would have been, long term, that's going to set the organization back. And, I actually give Joe Cronin a lot of credit for saying, like, no, I have to look out for the best interests of the franchise. I have the opportunity to draft a guy who could be a franchise player and have him for 4 years on a rookie contract. Like, I'm not going to trade that for, like, a second-tier star just to, give us maybe a little bit more of a shot at, being a 6 seed with,
a little bit more Dame runway.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it doesn't really, it helps you short term, but long term, and by the way, like, the Lakers found out it didn't help them short term, and it, like, crippled them long term. They may never have a shot at winning a championship again because of how devastating that decision was. And
they did get the one with Anthony Davis, though, in the bubble.
They did. Yeah, they did.
They got the one. They got the one, so the whole thing was worth it. But also, you look at, the way Anthony Davis is talked about now versus the way Anthony Davis was talked about in New Orleans. Like,
same goes for KD, same goes for Chris Paul, same goes for, like
how
that
different
whole generation.
How differently do you think Dwight Howard would be viewed by fans if he had stayed in Orlando?
Yeah, I mean,
how different do you think Carmelo Anthony would be viewed by people if he had stayed in Denver?
Completely different.
Yeah, so I think it's like, it just, like, it's always not. It's not all, like, going and, like, pushing out. Like, it's like there are times
just like
where
Dirk and Kobe and Steph and those guys, like, those, and that I think is the aspect of this that, like, I think
Tim
people
Duncan,
tend to ignore with Dame is, like, this is what he gives up here. And like, as fun as it was to watch Miami these playoffs, I would still, even with Dame on that team, I wouldn't pick them to win the championship next year. I still don't think they're better than
Milwaukee
they aren't better than Denver, No. And so, like, if Dame leaves and trades away the way that Kobe was looked at, the way that Tim was looked at, the way that Steph and the way that Dirk are looked at, and then doesn't win, that's something that, like, he then has to live with. The people who were pushing him out of Portland don't have to.
No.
The people who are, like, it's saying, like, yeah, just move on or whatever. And that's the thing that I've always tried to stress. It's like, I have never, from my perspective, said I want Dame out of Portland. I've only said I want a resolution. Just like I think just one way or the other.
Yeah,
let's all make a decision. Let's all stand by it. Let's all move forward.
That's just out of my own. I mean, it's his life and his career. He can do whatever he wants, but it's just out of my own just annoyance with,
all
the
of
team, the team that I cover, and, like, I put a lot of work into covering, a lot of different aspects of the team. I am not a Damian Lillard beat writer. I am a Portland Trail Blazers beat writer, and I just feel like, there's other stuff I want to do. There's other stories I want to write. There's other guys I want to kind of focus on. I'm happy, the way that, and I think the way that I think most people around the Blazers, or at least among, like, fans that I talk to, feel like is, if Dame wants to still be on board with this and do, be, the veteran with, like, Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson, if he wants to be a part of that, great. If he wants to go somewhere else, cool.
Yeah. And that's so fascinating that we've arrived there with Dame.
Yeah.
This has been a blast. Like you mentioned, you do cover the Portland Trail Blazers at the Rose Garden Report newsletter. Really, really well. I myself am subscribed. It's really good stuff. Thank you very much, Sean, for hopping on. And I'll see you in a couple weeks in Vegas.
Yeah, I'll see you at Summer League, man. It's always fun to talk to you.
Thank you very much.